Now let's talk to Mr. Tony Agwans, Senior Lecturer, Anglia-Ruskin University, who joins us virtually from London in the UK. A very good morning to you and a warm welcome to the program.
Good morning, Olamide. Good to be on your program this morning.
It's good to have you, Olumide. It is Mr. Agwans. But let's go straight right off the bat to the counteroffensive and the conflict. We've been reporting this morning offensives and counteroffensives. We've been reporting drone attacks. We've been reporting the repelling of attacks by Russia of Ukraine and vice versa. We've been told that Ukraine is making advancements in the southern part of the country, the southern part of the country. Russia is trying to defend those positions, and Russia is trying to make incursions into the eastern part of the country. Ukraine is trying to defend those positions. So it seems there is some sort of gains made on either side. To which degree we do not know, because it depends on the propaganda both sides are spewing. What at this point of the war do you think, where do you think we are at this point? Is it a stalemate, as has been previously analyzed, or is Ukraine making slow but steady progress?
Yeah, thank you, Olumide, for that question and for your robust intro before you brought me in. When you look at the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and like you said, we are getting close to the 560-day, mark. It's a case of kind of deja vu now, because even military experts, everyone, diplomats, international relations, czars, everyone is at a confusion point as to what actually is happening. There seems not to be any headway. Neither side is making any gains, and there has not been any inroad as far as diplomacy is concerned and negotiations. Nothing is happening. But going straight to your question, even this week, the week just passed, the American and Ukrainian officials did admit that the summer offensive that was very much heralded has not yielded much result as they would expect. So both Ukrainian and US and even NATO officials, military officials, have said that the counter-offensive has been slow, especially when you look at the Ukrainian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. There's been a really slow offensive from the Ukrainians. But however, there have been some pushback. Ukrainians officials have said they've been able to, push back some Russian corridors along that eastern axis. But like you said, things are just at a standstill at the moment.
Ukraine needed a wartime president when President Vladimir Zelensky was elected as president of Ukraine, though he couldn't have known it at the time that he will become a wartime president. Now that he seems to be living up to expectations of demonstrating to the world the veracity of the Ukrainian spirit, their tenacity, their doggedness, and their resilience. He's been taking a few decisions to clean up the public image of Ukraine, previously dampened or stained by reports of corruption in Ukraine, going as far as the Burisma scandal involving the President of the United States' son, Hunter Biden, and even now situations of alleged fraud involved in the enlistments and the drafting of men into the Ukrainian army. Now we understand that the defense minister is to be changed. The reasons given was not specific, but also aside from that, also a fraud allegation involving a Ukrainian oligarch who was said to have supported President Zelensky, but now a warrant has been issued for his arrest. A Ukrainian billionaire who owns one of the top TV stations in Ukraine, who is to be arrested. So President Zelensky seems to be cleaning house. Is he indeed cleaning house?
Absolutely, he is. Like you said just now, the defense minister, Alexei Reznikov, is being shoved aside. And as we would expect, President Zelensky has said they need a new approach. The war is 19 months and all that. And let's not forget, despite all the fraud allegations, the scandals, these things are bound to happen because when we talk of, corruption within military hierarchies, political elite, military contractors, these things will definitely happen. If we look back, the same thing has even happened within the Russian military some months back. So I think it's the turn of the Ukrainians. So these changes are very, very much expected. For me, I think the slow pace of the, counteroffensive may even be the major reason why President Zelensky is bringing in a new defense chief. So that may be the reason. But the scandal has not also done Alexei Reznikov any good. There've been a lot of, backhand deals going on. Although he has not been specifically fingered as actually being responsible, but he is the person in charge. So to be candid, I think President Zelensky, when you look at him, a comedian without political experience, I think the way he has handled this crisis, he has actually behaved like a statesman. And I think Ukrainians are very, very, they are pleased with him, they are happy with him, and he's handled himself very well. So hopefully, when the new defense chief comes in, there might be some new approach, some new strategy as far as the procurement and execution of this war is concerned. So that is the hope of the Ukrainian people, and it's the hope of the West, who have been supporting the Ukrainians to the hilt since the crisis began 19 months ago.
He said he's handled himself as a statesman, and that seems to be the case. But there have been analysis to the effect that, yes, a statesman he has been, and indeed he is. But as far as mediation goes, as far as towing a middle path, as far as reconciliation goes, as far as ending the war, he is in a very straitjacketed position, yielding neither to the right nor the left, as is President Putin. But President Putin has accused Ukraine of not wanting to come to the negotiating table. It's been said, is it for lack of experience or want of experience that President Zelensky, a very young man in this very powerful position, has not been more circumspect, even though he's defending territorial integrity of Ukraine, which he must and he is. Is there no case for leaving a door open for negotiations? It seems he doesn't want to hear the name of Vladimir Putin as far as that is concerned until the Russian troops evacuate Ukraine and leave the occupied territory.
Yeah, I think when you look at the genesis of this whole crisis, NATO membership, Russia not wanting the West and NATO to be near its borders, and rightly so, they may be justified in their reasons. And then you look at the Ukrainian side, not wanting another nation to determine the kind of association and friendship and relationship they keep, then you also feel for them. Yes, we may think that because of the relative inexperience diplomatically of President Zelensky, he could have done some things differently and probably, giving some, leeway to some Russian demands and requests and averted this war. But then, when you also look at it, Ukraine is a sovereign nation, and they should be able to determine the kind of, regional groupings or military alliance they can join. But again, in the context of the world geopolitical and economic order, you will agree with me that there's a lot of, politics going on between Russia, the United States, especially, that is the undertone, responsible for all this. So, and that is where analysts like us have always said that in situations like this, probably the United Nations could do more. But like it has always been, even when Iraq was invaded by the US in the early 90s, the UN have come out to be an organization that is more or less a toothless bulldog. They are just there. They back, but they don't bite. So it's so unfortunate, and I don't envy President Zelensky at all. He's in a very tight corner.
Indeed, and that corner he's in was made worse by the expiration of the Black Sea grain deal. All roads lead to Sochi for the resuscitation of that deal, if it does happen, as President Putin and President Erdogan of Turkey meet to discuss the conditions for Russia to kickstart it once again. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the outcome?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic. You know, the Turkish president, Erdogan, he's got the magic wand. He's done it before. And I believe that a deal will be struck. Let's not forget, since July 17th, Russia refused to sign the new deal after signing on three occasions. And I think also Russia demand should also be looked into. There's a lot of restrictions on their own export of fertilizers and grains. So it's a kind of 50-50. Erdogan, we're talking of experience. He's very experienced in these matters. He's been there, so he knows what to do. He will say the right things. And I believe the Black Sea grain deal will be back on after today's meeting in Sochi. Let's not also forget another dangerous dimension. There have been a lot of Russian attacks on the seaport infrastructure of Ukraine, especially in the Odessa region. So that may be the only snag in getting the success we're all looking for in this meeting between Putin and Erdogan later today. There's huge consequence. The prices of grain worldwide has risen, and if this is not quickly settled as we move into the winter months, there may be a lot of economic consequences for other parts of the world, and most nations that depend on Ukrainian grains for their survival.
Now, as this continues, we know that the humanitarian fallout is very dire. We've talked about the fallout to the ecosystem of Ukraine, but not many people are drawing attention to the fact that wildlife has been destroyed. Now, before you talk about wildlife, you talk about human life, and you talk about the emigration of people out of Ukraine, the cross-border crossings out of Ukraine to the surrounding nations. The United Nations says over 25 million people have left Ukraine because of this crisis. And Ukraine, in the meantime, is trying to conscript more people and have those men between the ages of 18 years of age upwards to be drafted into the army. It seems as though the situation is getting more tense and the situation is getting more dire for the people living inside Ukraine. Think is the tact of President Zelensky as far as encouraging them that even though this war seems to continue, there will be light at the end of the tunnel, because war weariness is a major factor that will affect both sides, and Putin and Zelensky have a responsibility to carry their people along. Even Putin, no matter how dictatorial he is or how hardline he is, he has a responsibility to try and make sure the people don't get tired of the war so as to not implode from within. The same as Zelensky. Who do you think is doing a better job? And do you think that that is the tact they'll need to take as this war continues to go on?
Yeah, if when you look at the war, obviously the Russians are the aggressors, and Ukraine is the nation at the receiving end. So I would say that it's the Ukrainians that are suffering more of the carnage and destruction. Even last night, the night before, like you mentioned in your report, there were a lot of drone attacks, firefights, over 557 shellings and all that. So Ukrainians are actually the one, under the cushion here. So, so we will expect that the Ukrainians have suffered more in this crisis. But also, there's also been questions of, low morale within the Russian army and all that. People, getting war weary, like you mentioned as well. So it is like we said at the beginning of this conversation, the war is just at a stage of kind of a stalemate at the moment, and nobody is making headway. And hunger is just a whisker away, the United Nations General Assembly. Let's hope that, a clever person from somewhere, will stop this carnage. There's been a lot of death and destruction, especially on the Ukrainian side, because the Russians are the ones attacking. So children, men and women, being killed, civilian areas being targeted. So there's been a lot of war crimes, especially from the Russian side of things, who are attacking Ukraine. So it's a very, very dire situation. And for the humanity in all of us, we just pray and hope that as the United Nations General Assembly comes up in New York this coming days, the Russia-Ukraine crisis will be top of the agenda. And somebody have to give way. Both sides have to meet each other halfway on the negotiation table.
Finally, you mentioned, and it's not the first time it's been said, that the United Nations appears as a toothless bulldog that barks more than it can bite. And it has been proven time and again over the years by stop or bring to some sort of conclusion. Now, from the days of Kofi Annan, now to Guterres, does the personality of the Secretary General of the United Nations come into play? Or are the instruments and the articles of the formation of this association, is that what is holding them back? The nations themselves who refuse to come under the umbrella of the United Nations when they see fit, such as Russia, eluding and disdaining everything that the Security Council said prior to the beginning of this war.
Yeah, the personality of the Secretary General does come in. Antonio Guterres is the man there now. Kofi Annan was there. We had the Egyptian Boutros Ghali at some point there. And then there was this other man from South Korea. These people had different personalities. That is part of it. But the major problem with the United Nations is, and you have just mentioned it, Olumide, is the national interest. Remember, during the invasion of Iraq, the United Nations, told the U.S. not to invade, but they eventually went because the U.S. was saying Iraq, they have weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons and all that, which were later found not to be the case. So then you have China there, you have Russia itself. This, especially the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, as it suits them, they flout United Nations guidelines and procedures. So the organization is just being drawn here and there, and they don't seem to have, any inkling of the exact thing to do. So it's a question of what we call vested interest. So in this Russia-Ukraine crisis, the US have a vested interest, Russia have a vested interest, China have a vested interest, and this, continue to play out. Germany, these superpower nations, they all have their interests. They are protecting their economic interests. They are protecting their ego. So all these things affect world peace. And I think that it is high time the UN, they look at their books, and then people have been calling for reform of that organization. I think it is high time that reform actually happens.
It's a very good thought, and it's one that we hope that all people take on board. Thank you for your contribution and insight this morning, Dr. Tony Agwin, Senior Lecturer, Anglo-Ruskin University in London, who joined us from there. Many thanks for being a part of the program.
Thank you, Olumide. Have a great day.
You too. After the break,